Battle for Bikini Bottom was not a game that was necessarily respected by the speedrunning community. It was more of like a controversy, I would say, that people were maybe some people were jealous that the game was getting so popular. Maybe people were just skeptical of how, like, why we would take it serious.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back once again to the DCM show, your favorite local gaming show in New England. I'm your host, Howard, and today I have with me is a world-class speedrunner and Twitch streamer, SHiFT. How you doing tonight, SHiFT?
Hey, man. Good to be here.
Perfect. So I'm going to speedrun my way through all these questions, so you can just take your time. I'm the one who will be talking fast.
Sure.
So first, you are a world record speedrunner. So what exactly is a speedrunner when it comes to the world of video games?
Well, speedrunning began with the simple idea, how can we beat a game as quickly as possible? Because when you play, I guess you look back to the early 2000s, you have all these different platformers and single-player games before multiplayer online was a big widespread thing, and you think, like, how can I get more playtime out of a game like this? So, like, when I was a kid, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, I used to play the same game 20 times because I didn't have a lot of video games, and I guess that just kind of feeds the idea, how quickly can I beat this? So that was the origin of essentially the idea of speedrunning. But nowadays, since, it's been like 20 years, people have, like, why are we still playing the same game over and over again? It was because we're now doing it for sport. Like, we do it to compete with one another, compare times, see how low the games can go, see what the potential is of these games, stuff like that. Just pushing a game as far as it can possibly go for sport.
So how do you claim a valid speedrun? What's the process behind that?
It depends on the game, but the majority of the games require you to be on an official console. So there's no there is a term in video gaming called emulation, where a lot of the time people can use they can use some kind of a PC program that was designed to emulate an original console. That's usually unacceptable for most speedruns. So you need the original hardware for most of them, and you need some kind of a device that can capture your gameplay. So like a video recorder, but so you can record your raw feed of the game. So like they call that a capture card in speedrunning. And you also, a lot of time you need audio quality so you can actually hear the game being played. All these things are to prevent cheating, because there's a term called splicing in speedrunning, where people can cut together a perfect run without having to actually do the full run in one shot. And obviously, like, the problem with that is the idea of speedrunning is to beat it in one go as quickly as possible. But the potential of, like, cheating or splicing a run is there if there's not adequate video proof or audio proof. So that's typically what people look for, is acceptable video quality and audio quality of your run.
Yeah, so there needs to be like an archived little video to go with your world record. So you can't just say like, "Yep, I got it," and then like,
yeah, of course, yeah, because it's only a claim at that point. It's a claim and it doesn't have proof at that point. There are some games that require you to stream your runs as well. They won't let you submit a run if it was done offline and uploaded. So there are some games that do that, but I personally don't run any games that had that rule.
Would those be like the more competitive world records where you'd forced to stream live?
I think the only one that I know of is Super Mario Bros. 1, and that is probably because of how short it is, I would say. Maybe.
Oh, okay. Okay, just double checking. So you are the current world record holder for speedrunning the 2003 platformer SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, which, if I am correct, you can tell me if I'm wrong. You're right now at 48 minutes and 43 seconds?
Now it's at 37, excuse me.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Oh, geez.
Because I think the one that you might be thinking of is I got one and then another one the day after when I got that last one. I don't know how I did it 2 days in a row, but it was, yeah.
Okay. All right. So why did you choose this game of all games?
It's more like the other way around, right? I rediscovered this game through like speedrun videos. Like the guy who ran this game in the past, Cole, he was the world record holder from I think 2013 to 2014 on and off. Mostly it was him. And he had a lot of videos on his YouTube channel of him speedrunning the game. And there was also another runner, Hazel. She's a tasser, or like a tool assisted speedrunner who tries to push the game as fast as possible using emulation tools to test the potential of the game. Essentially, that's a whole different thread of speedrunning that we can talk about if you have time later. But these two people pushed the game for several years and had a lot of videos on their channels, just, I guess, waiting for the YouTube algorithm to pick them up. And I discovered one of these videos in the winter of 2016, early 2016, I should say. And I said, hey, this looks like a lot of fun. I forgot about this game, so I might want to play it again. So I replayed the game because I just rediscovered it. And then I said, well, now that I'm done playing it, I kind of want to try some of these tricks that I saw them do. I went through with the cruise boosting and the sponge gliding and stuff. And eventually I just got to the point where I'm like, well, I know how all these tricks work now, so might as well just do a full run. And then that led to me streaming because I was, recording my runs on a laptop with a really small storage device. So I didn't want to waste too much storage space on there. So I started streaming the runs and people started watching them. And from there, it's just history.
Of course. Now, you've mentioned things like cruise boosting and sponge gliding, and I guess this goes with my next question, as considering that you've been the world record holder for speedrunning this game for a while now. Can you explain these tips on improvements and how you find these glitches and how do they work precisely?
Sure. And in a game like Battle for Bikini Bottom, which is a very polished and well-made game, more polished and well-made than it ever had the right to be, being a licensed game from the early 2000s, there are a lot of those from that era that aren't too good, but these guys put a lot of love, care, and polish into the game. So imagine like finding game-breaking stuff in these games is pretty difficult. So pretty much, it's kind of like a puzzle, right? And you start out with all the pieces kind of laid out, scattered. You don't really know, what to do. You just have a game. You know how to beat it, but you don't know how to beat it quickly. So typically, one person finds how, like, one little glitch, like for instance, like there's a glitch in the game that you can use to go out of bounds anywhere called hand disabling, because when you go out of bounds in Battle for Bikini Bottom, there's a little thing that says, okay, well, you've been out of bounds for too long, we're going to pull you back and put you back in the map, and you can actually disable that by using a glitch. So when that gets found, it's like, okay, we have one piece to the puzzle. What can we use this to how can we use this to lead to the next piece of the puzzle? So then the next piece of the puzzle will be, well, if we can collect this objective out of bounds, we can then warp to it, which can be used to skip part of a level, because obviously you wouldn't be getting that objective earlier in the run, without having to go through the gameplay first. But if you get it out of bounds, you can just warp to that part and skip the whole part of the game entirely. So that just one thing leads to another, and the more cracks you find in the actual game, the more you can kind of like find these glitches or exploits and combine them and so forth. And a lot of it's also movement as well, because though there are a lot of glitches in speedrunning, a lot of it is movement, where like you'll have two people doing the same types of tricks, but they'll have different times. And that's because one person is better at moving from one place to the other than the other person. Their movement's more fluid, it's more consistent, it's faster, smoother, They're better at drawing a straight line from one objective to the next. So there are a lot of factors that go into improving a speed run. And back when I first started running, a big thing was because like the game wasn't very popular or competitive. So usually in the less competitive games, the movement's not as optimized and there aren't a lot of tricks that have been found. But in this case, there had been a lot that had been found because, these guys had like full YouTube channels built off of this game. They were very small, like 1,000 subs each, but they were still there. They existed, and they played it for a couple of years. So, I mean, most of the improvements I was finding were just like routing changes, like figuring out where to put things in the run, and also just improving my own movement. So that's how I mostly contributed when I first got into the community. Whereas, lately we've been finding more glitches and like bigger skips and stuff over the past few years, but it was very difficult getting into a game that had surprisingly been figured out a decent amount, even though it wasn't that popular. It's interesting because the game's always, in the past it had always been small, but so many people have contributed to it. Like the few people who have contributed a lot. It's interesting.
So how many hours do you think it took until you got your first world record? Like how many hours of practice did you feel like you put in?
Not quite sure. I know that I played for around 2 months before I got my first one, but again, the game was like very small at the time.
Yeah.
It had like 17 people on the leaderboards. Now it has like 700 people on the leaderboards. And at this point, for the past 4.5 years, I've probably spent somewhere around between 8,500 and 9,000 hours playing this game.
That is a lot of practice considering you keep beating your personal best.
Yeah.
Like you said, you beat it twice in 1 week.
Yeah, it also goes back to the whole streaming thing where when you're streaming and your job is to stream, you got to churn out those hours, you know. So if you're playing the game anyway, it adds up a lot.
So when you're streaming these world record attempts, do you feel like there's an added pressure because there's an audience like watching you, or do you feel, like you're into it?
At first, it probably felt that way, I'm sure, but over time, you just kind of get used to it. And I kind of look at streaming as more of like having company, where you're sitting there playing a game, somebody's there to talk to, you know. It's nice when people ask questions about the run. People just spread jokes and stuff and memes while we're playing. Just have a good laugh, have a good time talking. And when it's time to focus up, like if I'm on record pace, like halfway through the run, it's like, okay, we know it's like serious time now, you know. But it's fun. It's a good experience just sitting around doing attempts, talking to people, you know, people supporting the whole speedrunning thing, so we can do this for as long as we can each day. It's a big reason why speedrunning is even as competitive as it is now, because of streaming, because without it, you wouldn't have people being able to put these kinds of hours in, you know.
Mhm. So about community, I wanted to talk to you about that. Is the speedrunning community for this game? One would think like, in order to get the world record, everything's competitive. But I've seen you and a bunch of people in the SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom speedrunning community actively go out of their way to help people and teach them how to do all these tricks. Like one big community helping each other, which is very interesting. Like, what do you have to? Like, wouldn't it be the other way around where you wouldn't tell anyone how you do it?
You would think that's how it works, but typically in speedrunning culture, just for any game really, it's pretty much taboo to kind of withhold strats. They call that hiding strats. It sounds like, I mean, it's to state the obvious, like, you know, hiding strats or concealing strats. You know, people don't like it when you find a strategy and you conceal it just to get a better time than somebody else, because ultimately the original idea of speedrunning was to push a game as far as possible, and it's a collaborative thing where people want to see the potential of the game get pushed down. So if you let the competition between players get in the way of the game's progress, it's seen as being selfish, essentially. And in our community especially, we don't, you know, go back and forth over who has like which time and whatnot. It is very much more mostly focused on like helping people, you know, get to the point where they can start doing runs, and if they need help learning strategies, we help them learn them as well. I spend a lot of my time making tutorials and like videos explaining the history of the game and how to get into it and so forth, to make it more accessible, because ultimately the more people who have eyes on the game, the more it's going to develop and the more people who have time to work on things. So like back in the day, I used to do all my own routing, strat hunting, and I used to grind my world record down while doing all this stuff. But nowadays you have multiple different people covering all these different fields. So one person can focus on doing one thing, while the other people focus on their own topics, and they all become experts at them. So next thing you know, you have all these people who are testing strategies and new routes, and though some of them are fast, some of them aren't. Like the idea that there are more people around and there are more ideas being thrown around, these games progress faster. And I don't think that closing a community off and, you know, being elitist about stuff is a good formula for progressing a lot of these games.
Yeah, and it's really nice to see like such a collaborative effort to make sure like anyone can like get a good world record in this game, which is it's a very nice wholesome thing. Because I remember when I got into like Killer Instinct, and when it came out in like 2013, and there were all these people making like videos to teach you how to play the game, and if I didn't watch them, I'd have no idea what to do. I'd still suck at it, you know. So it's nice to see a community come together and help teach people and
Yeah,
to
it's one of the
enjoy a
things
game.
we covered in the documentary as well, where it talks about how the game was always a thing that people wanted to try to learn, but a lot of people couldn't get over the skill barrier because it's a very difficult speed run. And what caused the game to really take off was the fact that tutorials were finally being made in 2016, and that paired with, you know, all the talk in the speedrunning community about like these guys are taking this SpongeBob game really seriously. You know, it caused some people to look into it because they were curious to see why it was being taken seriously, and that paired with the tutorials existing, like a lot of people did end up getting into the game and speedrunning it.
Of course. Now, just for some, I just have a question. Do you ever just get sick of just playing the same game over and over again? Like, because you said like what was it, 8,000 to 9,000 hours?
Yeah. Honestly, most people do, but I don't feel like I've gotten tired of it yet. I have this I guess you could say I have it pretty much down to a science now, like how to not burn out from playing a game.
Mhm.
And a lot of it is, I like to say, what you want to do. Your goal should obviously be to improve. Um, Maybe there are different metrics for measuring that. Like you shouldn't focus too much on the numbers of your splits. More of like sometimes it's good to focus on how you feel. Like, do I feel like I'm doing this consistently? Am I confident here? Am I confident in this area? But a lot of it for me is making sure that no matter what, when I finish the day, my end goal is to want to come back tomorrow and play again, or to have enough fun by the end to say, you know what, I want to come back and do this again tomorrow. And if you practice that mindset every day of I want to enjoy this the next day, if it becomes your goal to have fun while you're still trying to improve, it's hard to get to the point where you feel like, you're burning out unless you stop improving, which I feel like I haven't stopped improving since I first started playing. So, I mean, I don't know if that's ever going to stop, but whenever I feel like I'm not improving as much as I should be, I look into newer strategies and trying to move things around. Obviously, the deeper you go into a game, the harder it is to find things like that. But you come to get used to the idea that it's going to get harder as you keep going. So, that's another thing too, is you get used to the stuff that I get frustrated at now. Like I couldn't even handle 2 years ago, and the stuff that I used to get frustrated at 2 years ago is like stuff that I would just wouldn't even care about now. You just get used to dealing with stuff as things get harder. You put more pressure on yourself, and just adapt to it.
Of course. Which is a great way to look at things. Honestly, it's such a positive way to look at it, which I think is like not, if you want to play a game over and over again, just trying for self-improvement, but also having fun should be the main key here. And also there's, you have world records in 3 categories for this game, being any percent, which is completing the game at any percent needed, 100%, and new game plus. Can you tell me what all those are like?
Sure. Any percent is the one that people have been running for the past 10 years. That's just, as you said, beat the game as quickly as possible. In this game, there are 100 different golden spatulas, which are the objectives that you use to progress through the game. And when you collect all 100, that's 100%. So that would be the difference between those two. And 100% has a lot more to take on, as it would imply. Like there are many more tricks, a lot more movement that you'd have to master. NG Plus, there is no official New Game Plus in this game, but we kind of just made it up on our own as like a side category for fun. New Game Plus in games that actually do have New Game Plus are defined as ones where you are invited to restart the game, but this time with unlockables that you wouldn't have had in your first playthrough. So we kind of do that in Battle for Bikini Bottom with the use of in-game codes to unlock the unlockable moves early. So because of that, it opens up for more movement and different strategies and different routing. So it's fun, but it's not as serious as any percent or 100%. I actually have a few other world records on the extension boards, which are categories that are like for fun, but not considered as serious enough to be on the main leaderboards. And those would be all level spatulas, which is just collecting a select number of spatulas, except for there are spatulas you get for trading in hidden objects, and we don't get those in that run. There's a category with one of the newer tricks banned. I shouldn't say newer because now it's 2 years old now, but back when it was new, there was a big controversy over the tricks. So there was a split between any percent and the SBA, the skee ball trick, where you generate money using the skee ball machine in the pier. So there were 2 categories, and after a while, it kind of got phased out, the idea of playing the game without it, so it got moved to the extension boards. There's another one called cheap percent, which is, again, like these 3 categories I've talked about are all just kind of like less serious for fun categories that are not on the main leaderboards. But cheap percent is just beating the game as fast as possible, but you can use, back in the day, they had the in-game developer codes that they would have on like the early 2000s platformers and stuff, where you like hold down triggers and like type in cheat codes with the buttons, and like certain patterns will give you certain stuff. So you can do that. You're allowed to use the cheat codes in this run, and you can beat the game in like 2 minutes. It's It's pretty funny. Good meme.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, so like the beginning of the run is just like 8 seconds of just mashing cheat codes. It's like
Yeah, and it's all
90
weird
plus
inputs.
Yeah, it's like 90 plus inputs in 8 seconds because the game the category is so optimized where like your time is determined by how quickly you enter the cheat codes, and then like you have to play perfectly for the rest of the run. It's pretty stupid, but it's a good meme.
It is. So now I want to talk to you about the documentary series you've been making about the history of speedrunning this game. First of all, what made you suddenly decide that like this needed a documentary series and a well done series, might I add? It's great so far.
I don't know if you
What was
know
your-
who Average Trey is, one of the former record holders in Super Mario Sunshine. He's done a lot of documentary work for that game as well. I've known him since 2016 when I first started running this game, and he'd been around since like the beginning. Like he used to watch Cole and Hazel play back in like 2015. So we met at GDQ and we talked about the idea of making a documentary for the game back then. This is when the game had just gotten to GDQ, but a lot of people felt like that was like the last hurrah, like the game's big moment being in GDQ. Obviously, we know now that a lot more happened after that. So back then we toyed around with the idea of like we should make a documentary on this game because he was just starting to get into stuff like that as well. And he went on to create the Super Mario Sunshine documentary that a lot of people have seen. It says like 3 million views on YouTube. But as time went on, I realized that I wasn't ready to make a documentary yet. And like I think the idea that we both wanted to do it together was kind of lost at some point. But 3 years after we had that conversation, I achieved the first 49-minute time in any percent. And I realized at that point, based on some of the events that just happened recently and the remake getting announced, I'm like, okay, I think it's time that we make a documentary on this game. Like I decided that I wanted to take it on myself, where we talk about everything from the creation of the first game to the creation of the remake. Just a 10-year time span of speed running in general. Like, so it's 2000. We mentioned like the game. We talk about the game's release in 2003. Talk about the 10 years of speed running, and finish it off with the remake's release. That was the idea. And for the next half year, I really kind of just struggled to motivate myself to start because I really felt like it was too daunting of a task to take on. Like I didn't even know how to do keyframes in video editing, and anybody who knows how to video edit, they know that's like the most basic thing. Like I didn't even know how to do that. So I'm like, how am I going to do all this not even knowing how to edit videos? So I'd done stuff like when I was a kid with Windows Movie Maker, but this is just next level. Like, how am I going to make this entertaining? So there was a guy at the end of 2019, Exiled Prince, who he's involved in a bunch of communities like Super Mario 64 and The Simpsons Hit and Run and ours as well. And he said that he wanted to take on the idea of making a documentary. So he started writing a script for himself. And one of my friends, Jared's Giants, we looked into the script and we decided it wasn't really the direction that we felt was like appropriate for the community. Like it wasn't like the tone and like the information presentation was a little bit off. So, you know, I decided to rewrite the whole thing. And it ended up being, his version of it was like around like 16 pages, I think, single space. When I rewrote the documentary and took my own direction on it, like I had said I wanted to, but I wasn't sure if I could. When I ended up doing that, it came out to around 123 or something like that pages of just raw writing and research and so forth. And that's when I decided I want to split it into 4 parts because it's just too much information. So if you've seen like the whole part 1, part 2, part 3 scheme on YouTube, like that's the reason why it's split up, because there's just so much to cover, because the information, the history of the game is just so rich and deep. There's so much to go into. And people were skeptical, like, why are there 4 parts and why is the first part an hour? But people loved the first part. They loved the second part, which again was 90 minutes covering one single year, because 2016 was so big for the game. Yeah, so I'm kind of hitting the wall again, where I'm not sure if I have what it takes to top what I've already done with a documentary series. And I'm kind of taking a little short break from it because I want parts 3 and 4 to be spectacular. So I guess I need to find more creative inspiration to, take the information and research and writing that I've done and turn it into something even better than we've already done before, like now. Yeah.
Of course. And the first two episodes are amazing quality, and I highly recommend it to anyone watching. But they are fantastic documentaries. I love looking at internet documentaries like that and just learning so much information. But just to go back for a quick second during your answer, you were SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom ran at GDQ, which is Games Done Quick, a charity event host where you speed run a game live in front of an audience of millions and thousands of people for charity, of course. What was that experience like?
It was an interesting one because up until that point, because back then, Battle for Bikini Bottom was not a game that was necessarily respected by the speedrunning community. It was more of like a controversy, I would say, that people were, maybe some people were jealous that the game was getting so popular. Maybe people were just skeptical of how, like, why we would take it seriously because it's a SpongeBob game. And most games that are speedrun are like old school Nintendo games. So people were skeptical of it. And I could definitely tell based on the way people kind of treated it when I kind of went around the venue and practiced and so forth. So it was a very different world back then where it wasn't accepted as a cult classic or like even a classic game in general that was deserving of something like a remake or all the attention that's gotten this year. So playing it, I wasn't sure what people were going to think of it. And I was hoping that I would play well enough to demonstrate, how great the run actually is. And to my surprise, I actually pulled off a lot of the hardest tricks first try and had some good movement to showcase as well. Obviously, it was a GDQ run and weird stuff happened where I actually died in one of the main bosses. Is pretty funny, but stuff like that happens when you have one shot and you're in front of over 100,000 people. It's difficult. But I was surprised at how much they liked the run, especially GDQ themselves, who invited me to do an interview after the run was over. And it was really nice of them. It was cool to answer questions from people, even though some of them, because the game was so new, a lot of the questions were asking about the show and not the game itself. So I had to answer who lives in a pineapple under the sea. They obviously picked some mean questions and some more serious questions. So I don't know. It was a different world back then when people weren't as aware outside of the speedrunning community that we're doing this. But now it seems everybody's seen the warped end of the game in the remake where you just pause the game and do the inputs to go straight to the end in the first 10 seconds. So many people have seen that clip. I've seen that get passed around so much. I'm seeing all these news gaming articles talking about how the speedrunning community worked with the developers of the remake to make the game better. It's really, really cool seeing all that stuff, picking up a magazine in Walmart and seeing my name in there. It's really awesome.
Yeah, your GDQ stream, that's where I actually first watched you for the first time, because all of a sudden my friend texted me, it's SpongeBob's at GDQ, and I'm like, huh? What? Why would that? What? So of course I watched it, and seeing you keep saying this is one of the hardest tricks to pull off and doing it effortlessly is probably one of the best streams at GDQ I saw in a while. But now I guess we can move on with what you were saying is because of all this, a huge community surge. Now the game has been remade earlier this year. Well, more like halfway into this year.
Yeah.
And you helped some development.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. You were on IGN with that warp skip that you found out where you beat the game in 2 minutes.
Yeah, just to clarify, I wasn't the one who found that.
Yeah.
I don't remember who the one was who found that, but I definitely was one of the people who helped popularize it because I was uploading videos on it. And obviously I have the biggest reach in the community, so if I upload it, people are gonna watch it, and it spreads around. People start running the game because oh, it's a 2-minute speed run. I can do this, It was nice little. It gets old quickly, but it was pretty crazy. I keep saying there's never going to be another speedrun release like Rehydrated ever again. What game do you know where a warp to the end of the game was found on the first day of release? It's crazy. People were finding stuff in this game even before the embargo was up to be able to release content. So the day the embargo was up, people were uploading footage of all these huge skips and stuff. It's just hilarious how integrated speedrunning into this game for it to break that badly on the first day or even the day before it came out. It's awesome. It really goes back to the idea that speedrunning is really what brought us back together to enjoy this game again after 17 years have gone by. It's still relevant to this day because of again, playing it for sport, which sounds funny for a SpongeBob game, but, you know, the subject matter has little to do with how high quality a game can actually be.
And I guess for my final question here is, what was the community's, the speedrunning community as a whole, for SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom when they announced the remake, and how like open the developers were to talking with speedrunners?
Yeah, at first, they just announced that there was going to be something called Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated. And we weren't sure if it was going to be a remaster or a remake. And to those of you who don't understand the difference between the two, a remaster would be the same game with updated graphics and polished visuals and, you know, a wider aspect ratio and so forth. And a remake is an entire rebuild from the ground up. So you have entirely different physics, entirely different tricks, therefore, because everything would be working differently. So the remake is what we got. So it's an entirely different game from the original with the levels ported in and, you know, vamped up to match the scale of the original. Even though it's a little bit off scale, everything's a little bit like in more closer quarters, but it's not exact, but it's close enough. So when we found that out, we were a little bit worried because we're thinking to ourselves, oh, it's not going to have cruise boosting and all the iconic stuff that gets talked about in the documentary. You know, it's going to be a different game. But ultimately, I think it was to its benefit because it is an entirely different game. And if it were the same game, it'd be boring to have the same game played, you know, two of the same games played by the same people. It probably would have divided the community a little bit. You know, the fact that they're two different games ended up being a blessing in disguise because, you know, the original game wasn't going to get something like a warp to the end of the game. You know, that was never going to happen. That was like a once in a lifetime experience for us. So we got to do that for a couple of days and it was fun. We had the other version of the run where we don't use the warp to beat the game. So it has all of its own unique tricks and unique moves. It's pretty much, it's a pretty decent run. It's not an amazing run like the original game, but it's good enough to have its own small little people like community surrounding the game, like a sub community within the larger community that plays both games. Because you see, when the game first came out, we were a little bit split, and I was worried, like, is it going to tear us up if we have half the people in the community playing one game and half playing the other? But now we kind of have a dynamic where a lot of the people who played Rehydrated are coming back to the original game, and when people get burned out of the original, they're going to give the remake a try and so forth. So it's nice that they both serve their own purposes and have their own, you know, little tastes that people can get into. They're not stepping on each other's toes. And that goes with the community interaction as well. Like, people aren't really fighting over which game is better and like which one's better for speedrunning and so forth. People are pretty respectful of both types of players in both games. And that's all I could really ask for. I'm just happy that things worked out and that people are being mature about everything, you know, because there are a lot of gaming communities that have a hard time doing that because, you know, it's just gaming on the internet. People can just say what they want and get away with it a lot of the times. So I'm just happy that people are being respectful and ultimately friendly, and something that we didn't know how it was going to go. It's very surprising, and I'm happy about it.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. I'm glad the community's all happy and not arguing and being toxic.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of that stuff in my day. I mean, I didn't get into a leadership position in this community by choice. It kind of just happened upon me. So
Yeah.
Having been involved with a lot of gaming communities in the past, like, I've kind of taken note of like where things can go wrong, what can potentially happen to cause problems. And I try to, you know, express like, we got to be better than that, you know, and people listen. I think it's cool that we can take something like this seriously and also be respectful about it.
Of course. So that's about all the questions I've had for you. Thank you so much for your time. Now, if you want to plug where all our audience could find you.
Sure, you can find me on twitch.tv/SHiFT if you want to watch me live, but if that's not your taste, if you don't got enough time in the day to do that, you can watch some of my shorter videos on youtube.com/ShiftSS. Those are both fine. And if you want to watch a documentary, you can search Battle for Bikini Bottom documentary on Google or BFBB documentary, and it'll be the first thing that comes up. The first part is an hour long if you want to get 5 years of history in an hour and learn a little bit about the origins of the game and where it came from, you know, how it was received when it originally came out, what happened to cause it to go out of popularity and then rise back again. You know, it's all in there. So the full thing is 2.5 hours long so far, but if you don't like part one, all good. You'll still get plenty of information in that one. And hope you enjoy if you end up checking it out.
All right, perfect. And that was our interview with SHiFT on DMC. Come back and check back for some more. later, because hopefully this does well. And I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.